Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Gigamon Cloud Suite HAWK webinar. This morning, I'm Jeff Wallach with Senate Wallach Technology Group, and this morning I have the pleasure to join me is Basir Balazera from Gigamon. He's the Senior Technical Marketing Engineer for their cloud solutions. Basir's been in the industry a long time, 15 years in IT management and implementation. His experiences really range from hands-on work on application architecture to development with DevOps and best practices around network security and application migration into the public cloud. So we're really blessed to have Basir this morning to present to us the Gigamon Cloud Suite. So I'm just gonna go ahead and hand it off to Basir.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Jeff. Thank you. Thank you for those for joining. As Jeff said, yeah, I've been in the industry for about 20 years. And before this, I worked for Fortune 100 companies and I worked for startups. So I've got a sense of both the practitioner and on the vendor side to get a good sense of what's happening out there. I've also done the whole rack and stack too. I remember moving from 3 racks in a closet to about 25 racks at a co-hosted location that used to also host Blizzard HB 7000 blade chassis. And that was fun because it always sounds like airplanes were taking off because the amount of air that are coming out of those fans in the back of those chassis. But yeah, today I'm here to talk about Gigamon HAWK, which, as I think most of you guys are aware, is going to go over the whole hybrid cloud. And apart from this, I'm also part of security panel conversations. So every couple of weeks, I get on and we have chats with different people that get on and talk about what's happening within the industry. And one of the things I've also realized is, it took us 2-3 decades to be able to build our data centers and to learn from that. So we can't just flip a switch and overnight become cloud native. It's a journey, so it's going to take us some time to get there. And so today I'm here to talk about how Gigamon is able to help with that. So as Jeff said, I am Basir Balazadeh, Technical Marketing Engineer at Gigamon, and my focus has been the public cloud. So a little bit about our Gigamon. We do have over 4,100 customers. We have about 125 different patents. Out of the Fortune 100, 83 of them are using us. A bunch of banks, service providers. So we're kind of like the biggest little secret that exists within the industry. And our main goal has been to provide a visibility into the infrastructure. Now, this is actually one of the ways when the company was founded was, the name Gigamon stands for gigabit, right? So this was in 2004, and that was a big deal to try to be able to gain visibility into speeds that are around 1 gig. Before that, it was 100 meg or 10 meg or whatever. And so Gigamon wanted to solve this challenge of providing pervasive visibility across all your infrastructure. And before Gigamon, the way we did this was we got spans, or we were able to somehow get a duplicate copy of the traffic from the infrastructure itself, the network infrastructure. But as you guys are aware, a network device, its job is to get packets from A to B. Its job is not to make a copy of it, it's just to get it from A to B. And this is where Gigamon was able to come in and remove that tax off of the networking gear to provide that visibility. But the world has changed since we came up with this solution, right? Now we've got the whole hybrid cloud, we've got the zero trust, we've got 5G, we have IoT, we have next generation data center, software defined this, SD-WAN. So a lot of things have changed very dramatically. But Gigamon has stayed to its true form and is able to shift and provide that same mission, which is provide the visibility into any infrastructure and anywhere. And so as the infrastructure has changed and adopted, so has Gigamon. All these little, and the challenge that Gigamon has solved, if I go back to the previous slide, which is a little bit more tidy up, is where do you place the tools to in an optimal location to get the traffic it needs to inspect? Now we have this spaghetti lines, and over here we're trying to send the tools to the data. Whereas when Gigamon comes in, we're sending the right information, the right data to the platforms that need to see and do its inspection. But on top of that, on top of being able to do the access and aggregation, we have the ability of doing transformation and analytics to enhance that data that's going to the tools. So for example, if we have a web application firewall, a WAF, all it really cares about is TCP port 80 and 443, right? It doesn't care about all the other noise that are happening on the infrastructure. So before Gigamon, you would plug that device into the network, and then you would create a span out of your switch, and you would send all that traffic to it. But then it has to discard the things it doesn't care about. So there's a CPU tax on it. There's also probably the consumption tax, the amount of packets that it's processing. So this is where Gigamon has the filtering capabilities. And on top of that, also these other functionalities, such as deduplication, SSL decryption, net flow generation. We have this new thing called application intelligence, which we're able to do layer 7 DPI inspection of the traffic. And then from there, we could tell, if somebody's usually SSH is on port 44 on port 22. You could spoof that. You could change the port, still do SSH, but because we're doing the DPI engine, we can inspect that traffic. And then on top of that, also we have something called the Threat Insight. It's a security tool that's a network response detection and response. So it's an ADR. So if you think about it, it's basically it's a time machine that goes back in time and is able to see how an infection happened in your network. So a big thing right now is malware. Ransomware. Ransomware is huge, right? Because the ransomware doesn't happen overnight. They sit in your network for a while undetected, and then after 14, 20, 30 days, whatever, that's when they do their damage. This is where an NDR is able to assist with that, to go back in time and see exactly what happened and prevent that from happening in the future. All right, now I'm going to focus on the cloud portion of this. But I've got a good knowledge of all the Gigamon products. So if there's any questions, please put it in chat, and I will definitely answer those questions as we go along. And so do not hesitate to ask questions. I'll be more than glad to help with that as we're going along. All right, so I'm going to sound a little preachy now, but I've been doing, like I said, security panels for a while now. And one of the biggest things that I need to remind people is the shared responsibility model. Whenever you're moving your data to any of the cloud providers, there's a demarcation between what the cloud vendor's responsibilities are for security and what are your responsibilities for your security. One of the panelists said there's 2 rules to cloud migration. Treat your cloud just the way that you treated your data center. That's rule number 1. Rule number 2 is never treat the cloud the way you treated your data center. And I was like, wait, what does that mean? Well, what the idea behind this is, remember I said we spent about 2-3 decades building our data centers. So that took a lot of time and effort and blood and sweat to learn how to do that. So that security mindset approach that we have, we need to take that and apply it to the cloud. But the tools have changed. The way we do things have changed. So it's no longer the same of how we used to do things versus what is the new way of doing things. And this is where Gigamon is starting to see this visibility gap between how we used to do things and how the new world is. And this is causing a lot of confusion and a lot of frustration for my customers. Because if you go back the last decade and you look at the hacks that are happening in the cloud, it's mostly people doing misconfigurations of their servers in the cloud because they assumed that the cloud vendor is going to take care of that for them. And that's where the issue happens. And so this gap that's happening between the cloud apps and the tools that we used to have in our data center is becoming bigger. And now it's more important because the cloud is it's a fad. It's staying around. The fact that we were able to maintain our business productivity was because of Zoom. Fun fact, before the pandemic, Zoom had about 10 million concurrent sessions per month. Okay, so that was, I think, November of 2019. Fast forward to April of 2020. Can you guys guess how many concurrent sessions Zoom was hosting? Any guesses? 330 million concurrent sessions per day, right? So it went from 10 million per month to 330 per day. And without the cloud, this would have not been possible. So the cloud is a thing, and it's not going to go away. It's going to be around for a long time, but I think it's going to be hybrid cloud for a long time. And so moving forward, the gaps that we're seeing, the challenges that we're seeing is the optimization of customer experience, prevent security and compliance issues, manage complexity and costs, and also drive cloud migration adoption to be successful. And this is where Gigamon has come out with this HAWK campaign to kind of remind the industry that, hey, Gigamon's been doing this for a long time, since about 2015. Well, we first came out with our solution with VMware, and then from there we went to AWS, we went to Azure, we went to all different clouds. And so that's the whole point about this HAWK, is we're able to get the traffic from anywhere, both physical, virtual, cloud, doesn't matter where those are. And then from there, we could send the relevant traffic to any of the tools that need to still do inspection. And more relevant, we can do this on any format. So if you still have bare metal, no problem. We could tap that. We could get into that. If you've got operational, so IoT devices, this is one of the cool things actually Gigamon is able to provide that a lot of people don't think about. Because all those packets are traversing the infrastructure network Gigamon has visibility into, we have passive visibility, non-intrusive visibility into IoT devices. So if you're at a retail location and you have those point of sales devices, those cash machines, they're plugged into the network. And Gigamon can see that. If you have IoT devices that are plugged into the network, Gigamon could see that. If you have medical IoT devices, we could see that. Whereas the new tools in the cloud require for you to install some kind of agent. They need to be managed IoT devices. Gigamon has non-intrusive visibility because we could see all those packets. And again, we have that DPI engine to be able to inspect that traffic as it's traversing the network. And so, yeah, so this is where Gigamon HAWK is able to provide this pervasive, non-intrusive visibility across the entire infrastructure to fill in the gap that we have been seeing with the new cloud migration. All right, so with that said, let me talk about how we actually do this and how does this all work. So as I mentioned, we released our solution for AWS in November of 2016. I remember this vividly because I was at reInvent in Las Vegas. And after we announced it, a bunch of people rushed over into our booth and they're like, wait, but there's flow logs. I was like, yeah, that exists, but we give you actual packets. They're like, wait, you could give us raw packets from the infrastructure? Like, yeah, we could give you layer 2 raw packets from the infrastructure. And people's minds were blown. They're like, because the cloud vendors have done everything in their power to remove access to layer 2. It's a multi-tenanted infrastructure. Millions of people are using it. And so they do not want to be able to, for your tenants, or to be able to spy on your neighbors. And the way they've done that is they've limited the broadcast between all the different infrastructure, all the different networks. So Gigamon is able to provide that raw packets within that infrastructure for us to still maintain that security and compliance and all those things we do in the data centers, same thing. And then with Azure, we did the same thing in 2017. And so let's talk about how we actually do this. So this whole thing is orchestrated and managed through something called a fabric manager. And this is Gigamon's piece of software that we wrote that manages all of Gigamon's appliances, be it physical, virtual, or living in the cloud. And so this fabric manager is the one that provides, that creates the single cohesive fabric that extends across the entire infrastructure. And so here's some screenshots of that. Just go quickly over them. So this is so when you first log in, there's a landing page that gives you a dashboard of what's happening in your infrastructure. So the health of things, so you can see the little bit of reds, how much utilization of each ports. Basically, a lot of statistics on what's happening with the fabric, the health of the fabric. And then we have this thing called the traffic. So this is where you define the source and the destination. And then the last tab is something called inventory. And as you can see, the physical nodes are on the top right here, and then all the virtual nodes are down here that we have support into to access. So that's the single component that manages all of Gigamon's appliances. Now you may ask, well, how does this work? How do we deploy this? So the solution works with, so we are hosted in both AWS and Azure Marketplace. So our solution, whenever we have a new version, we release the software into those marketplaces. But in this scenario, this happens to be a hybrid deployment. So this is where the Fabric Manager lives in the customer's data center that's managing the physical appliances. It can also be virtual appliances like VMware and Nutanix. And so the very first thing FM does is establishes a secure connection into the cloud platform's management. So in this case, it happens to be AWS. So we establish a connection into AWS's console. From there, we deploy something called the vSeries node. The vSeries node is the virtual appliance that's the equivalent of our H-series that resides in the data center. So that this is the thing that does the aggregation and the optimization of the traffic. Remember that the reason why this is because it resides in the cloud. So we're able to just pull that image from the marketplace. The next thing is the tapping. Now, tapping, there's multiple ways of doing this. When we first started this journey in 2016, there was no way of getting packets from the infrastructure. So we had to figure out a way to do that. And I know everybody hates this, and I hated it too when I was a practitioner, but how else are you supposed to do that? So we created something called a kernel mod. And some people refer to it as an agent, but in a Linux operating system, it's a kernel mod. We used a function of the Linux operating system to be able to get a copy of the packet to send over to our vSeries. So that little T in 2016 was something called a GV tap, a Gigamon virtual tap that got deployed onto those EC2 instances. And then fast forward to June of 2019, AWS introduced their VPC mirroring, and we're like, yay! Because for years we've been asking the cloud vendors to give us a native way of being able to get a copy of the traffic, because people hate running agents, and I get that, I understand that. And so when they announced their VPC mirroring capabilities, which was like, we knew that because we've been pushing them and we've been working with them. And so immediately as they announced it that day, we already had support for it. So so now we could use Gigamon GV tap, we could use VPC mirroring. We worked, there was the same thing with Azure. Azure, there was, they called it VTAP, but then it's on pause now. Hopefully they'll come back to it again. We were able to also support Azure VTAP. NSXT has service insertion. We could work with that. OpenStack has tap as a service, which actually Gigamon helped write. So we could work with that. Nutanix has the same thing. So if the platform has a native tapping capabilities, we will support that. And in fact, we will encourage that because it makes life easier for both Gigamon and for the end customer. Fast forward a little bit more, we started supporting a third method of receiving traffic, and that's a tunnel. So if there's some kind of a device, if there's a network load balancer, for example, in AWS, that's able to give us a copy of the traffic, then we'll receive that. So Gigamon doesn't really care how traffic comes into Gigamon. It could be our own taps, both virtual and physical. It could be native tapping from the net platform itself, or it could be tunnel as a source that comes in. So we don't really care. But once those packets come into Gigamon, then Gigamon cares, right? Because that's where you're buying them. That's what you're getting from us. It's the guarantee processing of the information, the packets. And the previous slides, that was the transformation and the analytics that comes with the packets. That's the value of the Gigamon, is to, once it comes into us, we clean up the packets, and then we send the relevant information, the relevant packets to the tools. And so this was an AWS slide, and I'm going to show you guys an Azure slide. Surprise! It's the same look, it's the same feel, it's the same thing. And that was a Gigamon mission, is to give the same look, the same feel, no matter what the infrastructure is. So you learn Gigamon one time, and you can apply it as many times as you want to different infrastructures. And again, as I mentioned, it took us 2-3 decades to build the data centers. This cloud journey is a journey. It's not something that you do overnight. You have to learn about it. You have to reimagine the way we do things in order to be very secure in a cloud environment. All right, so this was a hybrid deployment. Now let's talk about a pure all in the cloud deployment. And so this is something I'm actually seeing a lot with our customers is the hub of our network used to be our data center, right? That's where we had the single choke point, we have the single in and out, and we had a lot of control over that. The new world, the center of our network has shifted away from our data centers to the cloud. So SaaS applications, all these, everything that's moved into cloud as being the central location as our infrastructure. And on top of that, we no longer own this infrastructure. So how are we supposed to provide the same SLAs, the same guarantees that we had to our data center now in a new world that we no longer have access or control over? And so this is where I see this often, where you create a SecOps VPC, which is the hub, the central part of it, and the spokes are your different businesses, organizations, your different applications. And so you deploy Fabric Manager into the centralized location. You have the tools in the centralized location. Oh, one other thing I should also mention, the power of the cloud now allows you to take your security stack off of your data center and put it into cloud, and then so it follows you around wherever you go. I'm gonna put a quick plug for myself. I've been using something called Google Voice since 2008, right? So Google Voice is a cloud-based phone service that Google provides. It used to be called Ground Central. And so I've actually, since 2008, have never given out my actual cell phone number. I only give out my Google Voice number, because wherever I am in the world, when somebody calls that number, it rings on my phone, it rings on my laptop, it rings on my tablet, it rings on whatever device that has internet access and supports the app. I'm able to receive that call. And that's the power of the cloud, is you build the stack one time, and then no matter where you are, as long as there's piping and good internet connection, that service is able to follow you around. But of course, if you happen to have legacy data centers or something you want to still send traffic back to through VPN or Direct Connect or Express Route, whatever, we can still send that traffic back to the data centers, no problem. Now, a thing that's becoming a lot bigger now, as I mentioned, the whole infrastructure we no longer own, it's become zero trust. The whole idea with zero trust is we no longer have the firewalls, the moat and the castle and the soft squishiness inside. Everything you no longer you can trust where the information is coming from, because it's traversing multiple networks as it gets to its end destination. And on top of that, with new microservices, applications are being built differently than we did in the past. In the past, we used to build I'm forgetting the term. We used to build applications, monolithic applications, where we put all of the components of an application within a single virtual machine or single physical appliance. Now with microservices and containers, we're spreading the load of the application. So we have a container for the web server, for the proxy servers, for the application, for the load balancers, for the authentication, for the database. So every component of an application, it's getting its own unique little container, and that's called microservices. And as you can see in the slide, and this is actual customer deployment, they have a development stage, where a development environment where it's all siloed. It has no access to the internet. It's all in itself. And this is where vSeries runs in here, FM runs in here. So the tool stack, everything is within the development environment. And then staging and production has the shared services model. So that traffic needs to go into the shared services, which is the hub, before it goes out to the internet. And so this is where FM resides in here, and through vSeries, it's able to go with the traffic from these two different locations and bring it back into the shared services for the inspection. So the point of this is, again, it's a journey. We could start off with just if I used to do stuff in the data center, we could do the hybrid thing, we could do the hub and spoke in the cloud, we could do a little bit more mature architecture. No matter where you are on this journey, Gigamon is able to provide the solution for you to meet your compliance and your security needs as you've had in data center. And one other trend that I'm starting to see a lot is Equinix is becoming a really big provider of real estate. I think they're actually one of the biggest real estate owners on this planet. They have, I think, close to 250 or 300 data centers across the world. So that's becoming a pretty big thing. All right, I'm going to pause here, see if there's any questions from the audience before I continue. Anything, Jeff, are you seeing anything yet?
Yeah, if you have any questions, please feel free to enter them into the Q&A window and we'll then address them. I don't see them. I don't see any right now, Brazier, but if we do, I'll definitely let you know towards the end.
Excellent. Thank you, Jeff. All right. Another big topic is multi-cloud. How does Gigamon support multi-cloud? I don't think you'll be surprised. The same look, the same feel across the different infrastructure. So that FM that I showed earlier, through that one FM, you can establish the connection into all the different clouds. So it's the same look, same feel. It doesn't really matter for us where that infrastructure resides. Let's talk about containers a little bit. That's becoming a very big hot topic for a lot of our customers. And again, I don't think there's going to be much of a confusion around this. Gigamon incorporates the Fabric Manager work with Kubernetes, so it's the management software. We do have those APIs and SDKs built in FM to talk to Kubernetes. We deploy a container per pod or per cluster. It really depends on what you're using. As of right now, we support Flannel and Calico CNIs. So we do, so our container taps into that to get the copy of the traffic from the infrastructure and then sends that traffic to the visibility fabric. So on the right-hand part of it is the same look, the same field. It's just the traffic acquisition part of it is a little different because it's in a container format. And then we're going to be supporting Service Mesh and Istio and all these different flavors that are coming out. So again, for Gigamon, traffic acquisition, how we do that, not really a big part. It's whatever works best for the customer. It's what happens with the packets afterwards that Gigamon really cares about. And that's what's important for us is guaranteeing that packets are being delivered, guarantee that the packets are being processed properly, applying deduplication, doing some SSL decryption, all those things that are needed before it goes to the tool. And then this next diagram is going to show how this works. So as I mentioned, FM connects to Kubernetes. We register our GVTAP container solution, deploy the container, the GVTAP, associate traffic policies for security groups. This is what gives us permission to be able to do that. And then, one other thing I should mention. In the physical world, tools are directly plugged into Gigamon to the ports within Gigamon. So we send raw packets into the tools as they're plugged into Gigamon. In the cloud, we have to encapsulate the traffic before it goes to the tool through a tunnel. Can anybody guess why we use tunnel encapsulation? It's a networking 101 basic question. No guesses?
To protect the data.
Well, not so. It's, whenever a packet moves from A to B, source and destination changes, right? That's one of the laws of networking. Gigamon doesn't want the tool to know the packet that's coming from Gigamon. Gigamon wants the tool to think the packets are directly coming from the source. So because of that, we put a encapsulation, either L2GRE or VXLAN encapsulation around the packets to preserve the integrity of the packet, which is the source and destination. So from the source to the V-series encapsulation, and then V-series removes the encapsulation, does this thing, and then recapsulates it from the V-series to the tool, another encapsulation. So, and the cool thing about this is we're using industry standards, so there's nothing proprietary. So L2GRE or VXLAN, it's like 2 lines of code that allows the Linux or Windows to do the decapsulation of the L2GRE or VXLAN. So super easy. But going back to what you said, Jeff, we do have the ability of doing IPsec encapsulation also too. So some of our federal government agencies, when the traffic is in motion, the traffic needs to be encapsulated. So from source to Gigamon encapsulated, from Gigamon to destination, that's a little bit harder because we don't have control over the end tool, so that will not be encapsulated. But from source to Gigamon, it is encapsulated. So we do have the ability of doing that. oh, I should finish off the slide. Okay, so that was the container solution. So we do the same thing for VMware, the same look, the same feel. It's just a form factor is different, right? So in the past, before Gigamon came in, we would deploy all of our tools into a host, a VMware host. Gigamon solution is no need for that. We deploy a Gigamon appliance per host, and then we give you the same visibility across all of the different clusters within the hosts, within all the hosts within the cluster in a vCenter. And one thing I do want to mention, I used to do this demo, and I love doing this demo when I was supporting this, was doing vMotion in real time, right? So you move a VM from host to host, and then I would do like a constant ping to that VM, and I would see maybe like 1 or 2 packets drop as it did its vMotion. But Gigamon was able to still provide that pervasive visibility across the entire across the VMware cluster for that visibility. One other thing I should also mention with this solution is we have something called automatic target selection. So this is as your developers, as new instances come online, and as long as there's some kind of tapping mechanism into that new instance, and we created a filter, and the filter goes after HTTPS, right? So TCP port 443. If that rule applies to this new machine that comes online, we will automatically tap that traffic from this new machine to provide that visibility. So one of the things I like to say with Gigamon is you're putting guardrails around new infrastructure for your developers to go do things, right? The reason why cloud is such a popular solution for a lot of application developers is because it's removed the hurdles of NetOps and SecOps. We no longer have to say, we can't say no to them anymore because they go swipe their credit card, they go around us, then they launch stuff in AWS and Azure or in the cloud. So those hurdles that got removed by going to the public cloud, Gigamon is like, okay, we get that. That's totally fine. But let's put guardrails around it so that the security team has some visibility into what's happening in this environment without being intrusive. And so that's one of the benefits that you gain from Gigamon. Another one that you also gain is access to time. So I keep on reading successful cloud migration by companies is because they've retained their IT staff. So a lot of people are starting to have this anxiety around, I'm no longer relevant, my skill set is outdated, and it's no longer needed in the cloud world. It's like, whoa, hold on. The things that you've learned and the skills that you've gained, you could transform that into becoming relevant in the cloud space. And I was reading an article where some company was able to retain their entire 120 IT staff, and the way they did it, this migration to the cloud, was 4 hours of the old world and 4 hours of the new world. So it allowed for us to maintain that village knowledge and transfer that knowledge over to the new world. But the engineers just had to adapt and learn how the new way is doing. Skill set is still very relevant and important. It's just now being reimagined to be applied for the new way of doing things in the new world. And so that's a successful migration. And so I would highly recommend to maintain your staff as much as you can so that they can learn the new way of doing things in the cloud. And here's a quick summary of some of the benefits that you gain with our cloud solution. So flow mapping is drag and drop filter creation, all happening through Fabric Manager. Automatic target selection is something I talked about. I should also mention, a lot of people love to do the point and click and GUI, but we do have a very robust set of APIs. So if you're a little more mature into your cloud journey and you're starting to use automation languages like Terraform and Ansible and Puppet and Chef or CloudFormation template or ARM templates, whatever, those templates, those automation languages can interact with Fabric Manager using those APIs to do dynamic adjustments as the environment shifts. So we do have that ability of doing that too. Our GigaSmarts are like the slicing, masking, sampling, deduplication, load balancing. So some of those things that I mentioned early on when we first started, and we run across any of the clouds, no matter where. And Jeff, with that, I'm going to thank the audience and thank everybody who has participated. And if there's any question, we'd love to answer those questions, but otherwise, that's it.
Well, thanks, Bazir. Yeah, there's no questions, but I appreciate the presentation. It was very good. And as we know, because, as I mentioned to you earlier, I came from a world where we were basically looking at protocols all day long. And visibility is king. And that's really where Gigamon has been playing for many, many years now. So if you can't see it, you can't protect it, you can't figure it out. And so that's the idea behind this technology. And I really appreciate your presentation and how Gigamon now has transformed into the cloud, into the container world. It's really awesome.
And I'll give you an example, a perfect example of that, Jeff. A couple of years ago, so a lot of people love to publish their deployment. They like to open sources in GitHub. But one thing they forget is they're including their AWS secret and access key in those snippets that they're publishing into GitHub. So somebody was able to get a hold of Tesla's secret and access key to their AWS account. And what do you think happened with that? They didn't steal any data. They injected Bitcoin mining containers within the cluster that Tesla is running into AWS. So it wasn't harmful, but it cost AWS a lot of money for compute to be able to do the Bitcoining in their infrastructure in AWS. And to all of the tools and all of the alarms and all the stuff, nothing went off because it looked like regular container traffic happening. Now, if Gigamon was in there and the visibility, we would have been able to alert some of these tools that, hey, this is unusual traffic. This is not what's supposed to happen in the production environment. So this is one of the use cases that we've seen where having that visibility, actual raw packet visibility and infrastructure would save a lot of time and money and effort to prevent that from happening.
Absolutely. Again, thanks again, Basir, and thank you everybody for joining the webinar, and have a happy holiday.
Thank you all.